Susan Baker stared at her computer screen, her coffee growing cold beside her keyboard. The late afternoon sun filtered through her office window at the Colorado Department of Transportation, casting long shadows across her desk. As a highway infrastructure engineer, she had spent years studying ancient Native American trading routes, but something about today's data made her sit up straighter. "This can't be right," she muttered, adjusting her glasses. The patterns she saw in the ancient pathways matched perfectly with some unusual satellite data she had received from her friend at NASA. The trade routes weren't just random paths. They followed specific energy patterns that seemed to stretch up into the sky. She picked up her phone and dialed Paul Miller, an astronomer she had met at a conference last month. "Paul, you need to see this. Remember that crazy theory you mentioned about stellar energy patterns? I think I found something that might interest you." 2 days later, Paul stood in Susan's office, his usual neat appearance slightly disheveled from excitement. Maps and printouts covered every surface, showing overlays of ancient paths and stellar readings. "It's incredible," Paul said, running his hand through his graying hair. "These old trading routes, they're perfect mirrors of what we're seeing in space, like they were marking something our ancestors could somehow sense." Susan pointed to a particular line on the map. "Look here, this path the NSA used. It lines up exactly with that energy signature you found last month. And it's not just here. Every major ancient trading route we've studied shows the same pattern." Their discovery might have remained just an interesting coincidence if not for what happened next. As they studied the patterns, the first signs of something bigger appeared in the night sky. It started with strange lights that pilots reported seeing along these ancient routes. Then came the unexplained radar readings that seemed to follow the same paths. The scientific community was buzzing with theories, but no one could explain what was happening. On a cold morning in October, Susan was reviewing new satellite data when her computer screen suddenly went dark. Before she could reach for her phone to call its support, the screen lit up with a pattern she had never seen before. Geometric shapes danced across her monitor, forming what looked like a message. Paul burst into her office without knocking. "Are you seeing this? It's happening everywhere along the energy lines." The message, when finally decoded by a team of international scientists, was simple but world-changing. "Greetings, Pathwalkers. We are the Xeraxian Alliance." The first official contact happened 3 days later. A Xeraxian ship appeared in the sky above one of the ancient trading routes in New Mexico. It wasn't the dramatic invasion many had feared. Instead, it was a calculated demonstration of their existence and their connection to these paths. The Xeraxian representative, a tall being with iridescent skin and multiple arms, explained through a translator device that humans had stumbled upon something their species had been using for millennia: cosmic highways that crisscrossed the galaxy. "Your ancestors knew," the Xeraxian said, its voice resonating through the translator. "They felt the pull of these paths and marked them on your world. We have watched and waited to see if you would rediscover their significance." Susan and Paul found themselves at the center of an international scientific effort to understand these space roads. Teams of researchers from around the world gathered to study the connection between Earth's ancient paths and these cosmic highways. "The energy signatures are like ripples in space-time," Paul explained during a briefing with government officials. "These roads aren't just paths, they're natural phenomena that allow faster-than-light travel. The Xeraxians didn't create them. They just found them first and claimed them." Susan spent weeks analyzing data from both Earth and space. She discovered that the ancient peoples hadn't just marked these paths, they had somehow used them. Cave paintings and artifacts showed patterns that matched Xeraxian navigation charts perfectly. "Our ancestors weren't just wandering randomly," Susan explained to a room full of scientists. "They were following these cosmic roads, even if they didn't know exactly what they were following. Their intuition led them to map out something that spans the entire galaxy." The implications were enormous. Humanity had unknowingly been living on top of an interstellar highway system. The ancient paths that crossed continents were really just ground-level signs of something much bigger, a network of natural space lanes that could revolutionize human space travel. But excitement turned to concern when the Xeraxians revealed more about how these space roads were currently used. They weren't freely available to all species. The Xeraxian Alliance controlled access, charging hefty tolls and restricting usage based on their own criteria. "Your species is young," the Xeraxian representative stated. "You have much to learn before you can be trusted with direct access to the galactic roads." Susan and Paul shared a worried look during this announcement. They had helped discover humanity's connection to these cosmic highways, but now it seemed that connection might be denied by those who claimed ownership of the roads themselves. As the first part of this discovery phase came to an end, Earth's governments began urgent discussions about how to proceed. The paths that Susan had studied as simple trading routes had become the center of humanity's first major interstellar political challenge. Paul looked out the window of their new research facility, watching the strange lights of Xeraxian ships moving along the ancient routes in the night sky. "You know what's interesting?" he said to Susan. "We found these paths because you were studying how humans moved across the land. Maybe that's the key to everything. Understanding how our ancestors knew what they knew." Susan nodded, looking down at her original maps. "They left us a message in these paths," she said. "And now we need to figure out exactly what they were trying to tell us." The discovery had opened a door to the stars, but it had also revealed that the path forward wouldn't be simple. Humanity had found its way to the galactic highway system, but now they would have to fight for their right to use it. The real challenge was just beginning. Catherine Martinez stood before the Galactic Council, her heart pounding but her voice steady. The chamber, located on a massive Xeraxian space station, towered above her. Representatives from various alien species sat in rising tiers, their eyes, some glowing, some multifaceted, some barely visible, all fixed on her. "Earth's claim to these space roads isn't just based on recent discoveries," she said, gesturing to the holographic display showing ancient Earth trade routes. "Our ancestors mapped these paths thousands of years ago. They built their civilizations around them." The Xeraxian chief council member, Vexthor, lifted one of his four arms in dismissal. "Many primitive species notice the energy patterns. That doesn't grant them rights to the roads. We have maintained these highways for 50,000 years." Catherine had prepared for this argument. During her weeks of preparation, she had worked closely with Susan Baker and Paul Miller to understand every detail of humanity's connection to these cosmic highways. Now she played her strongest card. "We've discovered something interesting in our ancient laws and customs," she said, bringing up new images. Earth cultures didn't just map these routes. They had complex legal systems governing their use. The Native American nations, for example, had specific treaties about who could use certain paths and when. The chamber filled with murmuring as the translation devices carried her words to each species present. A representative from the Meridian Alliance, a species that looked like tall, crystalline structures, leaned forward with interest. "These laws," the Meridian representative chimed, creating musical notes that their translator converted to words. "They predate Xeraxian control of the routes." "By thousands of years," Catherine confirmed. "And under Article 47 of the Galactic Commons Charter, pre-existing indigenous claims must be considered in any territorial dispute." Vexthor's skin changed color, showing his agitation. The humans weren't using these roads for space travel. They merely walked along the ground beneath them. It's not the same thing. Back on Earth, in the newly established Galactic Relations Center, Susan Baker was watching the proceedings via satellite link. She turned to Paul Miller, who sat beside her. "They're missing the point entirely. The paths aren't just about physical travel." Paul nodded, sending a quick message to Catherine's datapad. "The energy signatures we've recorded from ancient sites prove they were interacting with the road's power, even if they weren't flying through space." Catherine received the message and smiled. "If I may," she said to the council, "I'd like to show you something our scientists have discovered." She brought up new data streams showing energy readings from ancient Earth sites. These are recordings from places our ancestors considered sacred. The energy patterns match exactly with what we now know are space road signatures. A new voice joined the discussion. The archival mind, a species that devoted itself to collecting and preserving galactic knowledge, spoke through their representative. We have records of similar patterns from other worlds. Young species often build their holy sites along the roads without understanding their true nature. But that's just it, Catherine pressed. Our ancestors did understand. Look at these cave paintings. She displayed images from various locations around Earth. They show the same mathematical patterns your ships use for navigation. They knew what they were marking. The chamber erupted in discussion. Species from across the galaxy debated among themselves, their translators creating a symphony of overlapping languages. Meanwhile, on Earth, things were getting tense. The Xeraxian Alliance had stationed ships along all major space road intersections near Earth, charging massive tolls for any human vessel wanting to use them. Some ships were turned away entirely, deemed unworthy of access. Captain Linda Powell of the Earth ship Stargazer faced one such blockade. "This is ridiculous," she said to her crew as they waited near Mars. "These roads belong to everyone. They're natural phenomena, not something the Xeraxians built." Back in the council chamber, Catherine was presenting evidence of how Earth's ancient civilizations had managed to tap into the road's energy for various purposes. They may not have built spaceships, she explained, but they understood these paths better than anyone realized. Their knowledge was just different. The Meridian representative spoke again. "Perhaps we should consider a compromise. The humans have shown a unique historical connection to these routes. Their claim has merit under galactic law." Vexthor's skin rippled with patterns of disapproval. "The roads require maintenance, protection. The humans aren't ready for such responsibility." "Then teach us," Catherine suggested. "Work with us instead of blocking us. Our ancestors understood things about these roads that even you might find valuable." The debate continued for hours. Catherine presented more evidence. Ancient maps that perfectly matched cosmic highway patterns, artifacts that resonated with the same energy frequencies as modern navigation equipment, and complex mathematical equations hidden in primitive art that described the road's behavior. Finally, the council called for a recess to consider all the evidence. Catherine stepped out of the chamber, exhausted but hopeful. Her communication device buzzed with a message from Susan. "You're doing great," Susan had written. "We found something else. Energy signatures that suggest our ancestors might have done more than just mark the roads. They might have actually modified them somehow." Catherine's eyes widened as she read the message. If they could prove that humans had once helped maintain or even alter these cosmic highways, it would strengthen their claims significantly. When the council reconvened, Vexthor spoke first. "We have conferred with our legal experts. The human claim cannot be entirely dismissed. However, we maintain that current control of the roads must remain with those who understand their proper use." Catherine felt a mix of frustration and determination. They had made progress. Getting the Xeraxians to acknowledge any human claim was a significant step, but it wasn't enough. Earth needed fair access to these roads to join the galactic community as equals. As she prepared to continue her argument, alerts flashed across the chamber's information screens. Something was happening along one of the main space roads near Earth. Energy patterns were shifting in ways the Xeraxians had never seen before. The ancient paths were awakening, and no one, not even the self-appointed gatekeepers of the galaxy, knew exactly what that meant. Catherine looked at the data streaming in and smiled. Maybe their ancestors had left them more than just maps. Maybe they had left them a key to unlocking these roads in ways the Xeraxians had never imagined. The battle for humanity's right to travel the stars was far from over, but they had made their first real progress. The gatekeepers would have to accept that these roads didn't belong to any one species. They belonged to all who could understand their true nature. Laura Thompson wiped sweat from her forehead as she studied the ancient petroglyphs in the New Mexico cave. As the lead scientist for Project Pathfinder, she had spent months trying to decode what their ancestors knew about the space roads. The answer had been staring them in the face all along. "Look at this pattern," she said to her research partner, Alan Carter. "It's not just art. It's a frequency map." She traced her finger along the spiral design that covered the cave wall. Our ancestors weren't just marking the paths, they were recording how to use them. Back at the research facility, Laura and her team worked day and night to understand what they had discovered. They called their breakthrough path resonance technology, a way to tap into the space roads using methods inspired by ancient human practices. The Xeraxians use brute force, Laura explained during a briefing with military and scientific leaders. They punched their way into the roads with massive energy expenditure. But our ancestors found a gentler way. They learned to resonate with the natural frequencies of the paths. Captain Daniel Wright listened intently from his seat in the front row. As the chosen pilot for the first test flight, he needed to understand every detail. "So instead of forcing our way in, we'll slip into the flow of the road itself." "Exactly," Laura nodded, pulling up a simulation on the main screen. "Think of it like surfing a wave instead of trying to cut through it with a motorboat." The first test vessel, a small ship named Pathfinder, was built in secret at an underground facility in Colorado. It looked different from other spaceships. Its hull was covered in patterns based on ancient cave art, and its engines were designed to emit frequencies matching those found at sacred sites around the world. On launch day, tension filled the control room. The Xeraxians had ships patrolling all known access points to the space roads. They would have to prove their technology worked while avoiding detection. "Pathfinder, you are clear for launch." Laura's voice was steady as she spoke into the microphone. "Remember, Captain Wright, feel the path, don't force it." Daniel sat in the pilot's seat, his hands resting lightly on the controls. The ship lifted off silently, its new engines barely making a sound. As they reached the lower edges of space, he could see the Xeraxian patrol ships in the distance, their massive forms blocking the known entry points to the space roads. "Beginning resonance sequence," Daniel reported. The ship's systems started emitting the frequencies Laura's team had discovered. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then Daniel felt it, a subtle pull, like a current in water. "We're getting something," Laura said excitedly, watching the readings from mission control. "The road is responding. It's different from the Xeraxian signals, more natural, like it's recognizing us." The Pathfinder began to move differently, gliding smoothly, as if caught in an invisible stream. Daniel relaxed his grip on the controls, letting the ship follow the path's natural flow. "It's working," he whispered. "We're actually doing it." Suddenly, alarm bells rang through the control room. "Xeraxian ships are changing course," someone called out. They've detected something. But before the alien vessels could intercept them, something extraordinary happened. The Pathfinder didn't just enter the space road. It seemed to become part of it. The ship's hull patterns began to glow with the same energy signature as the road itself. "They can't see us," Daniel reported, amazed. "We're not just on the road. We're resonating with it perfectly. Their sensors are passing right over us." Laura and her team cheered as they watched the Pathfinder slip past the Xeraxian blockade. They had done more than find a way to access the space roads. They had discovered a way to use them that the self-proclaimed masters of these paths had never imagined. The test flight continued for several hours. The Pathfinder traveled further and faster than any human ship had before, all while using barely any energy. When they finally returned to Earth, they had gathered enough data to prove their method wasn't just working. It was superior to the Xeraxian approach. "The roads aren't meant to be controlled," Laura explained at the post-flight briefing. "They're natural phenomena that respond to the right kind of interaction. Our ancestors understood this. They didn't try to master the paths. They learned to work with them." News of the successful test spread quickly through the scientific community. Other nations began building their own ships using path resonance technology. The Xeraxians, When they finally realized what had happened, were furious. This is a violation of galactic law, their representatives protested, but they couldn't explain why. The humans weren't damaging the roads or disrupting traffic. They were simply using them in a new way, one that seemed to be more in harmony with the road's natural properties. Daniel became a teacher, helping train other pilots in the new techniques. Forget everything you know about conventional spaceflight, he would tell them. These roads are alive in their own way. You need to feel them, move with them. Laura's team continued to make discoveries. They found that different ancient patterns worked better for different types of space roads. Some paths responded better to frequencies derived from Native American chants, others to patterns found in African tribal art. Every human culture that lived along these paths contributed something to our understanding, Laura said during a presentation to international scientists. They were all observing and recording different aspects of the same phenomenon. The breakthrough changed everything. Humanity now had a way to access the galaxy that didn't depend on Xeraxian permission. Even better, their method proved to be more efficient and less disruptive to the natural flow of the space roads. As more human ships took to the stars using path resonance technology, the galaxy watched with growing interest. The species that everyone had dismissed as primitive newcomers had unlocked secrets about the space roads that had been hidden for millennia. Laura stood at her laboratory window, watching ships practicing the new flight patterns in the sky above. Our ancestors left us more than just maps, she said to Alan. They left us the key to the stars themselves. We just had to learn how to read it. The age of human innovation in space travel had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. Commander Amanda Foster stood on the bridge of her ship as the first wave of Xeraxian warships appeared in Earth's orbit. The alien vessels were massive, their hulls gleaming with advanced technology that made Earth's best ships look primitive in comparison. They're blocking every major space road access point, her second-in-command, Ryan Peters, reported. 500 ships and counting. Amanda studied the tactical display with calm determination. Her small fleet of 30 Earth ships seemed tiny against the Xeraxian armada, but they had something the aliens didn't understand: the wisdom of ancient human warriors who had fought along these same paths on Earth. Send word to all ships, she ordered. Activate path resonance systems and prepare to execute Battle Plan Apache. The plan was based on old Native American warfare tactics, adapted for space combat. Instead of fighting the Xeraxians head-on, they would use the space roads themselves as their advantage. Message from the Xeraxian commander, Ryan announced. The alien's image appeared on their main screen, its iridescent skin pulsing with anger. Your illegal use of the sacred roads ends now, the Xeraxian declared. Surrender your ships and disable your resonance technology, or face destruction. Amanda stepped forward. These roads don't belong to you. They never did. We're not surrendering our right to use them. The Xeraxian's skin flashed dark colors. Then you leave us no choice. The alien ships began charging their weapons, but Amanda had studied Earth's history of asymmetric warfare carefully. Her ships were already moving, splitting into smaller groups just as ancient tribal warriors would divide their forces to confuse larger armies. All ships, execute Phase 1, she commanded. The Earth vessels activated their resonance systems, their hulls beginning to glow with the natural energy of the space roads. The Xeraxians fired their first volley, but the human ships were already merging with the road's energy patterns. Just like the ghost dancers of the plains, they became almost invisible, leaving only faint traces of their presence. They can't lock onto us, Ryan reported with a grin. Their targeting systems are designed for ships fighting against the road's energy, not working with it. Amanda nodded. Begin Phase 2. Remember your training. Move like water, not like stones. The Earth fleet split into even smaller groups, using ancient hunting patterns that Native Americans had once used to surround larger prey. Each ship flowed with the natural currents of the space roads, appearing and disappearing like spirits. The Xeraxian fleet's formation began to break as they tried to track the elusive human vessels. Their massive ships, designed for direct confrontation, struggled to match the fluid movements of the Earth ships. "Send word to the reserve fleet," Amanda ordered. "Begin Phase 3. From hidden positions near the asteroid belt, more Earth ships emerged. They weren't warships. They were cargo vessels, each one modified with path resonance technology. Like ancient trading caravans, they began moving along the space roads, slipping past the confused Zyraxian blockade. "What are you doing?" the Zyraxian commander demanded, his image flickering with interference. "Your primitive tricks cannot succeed." "We're not trying to fight you," Amanda replied calmly. "We're showing you that you can't stop us from using the roads. The more you try, the more you prove our point. These paths are meant to be shared, not controlled." The battle continued for hours. The Zyraxians fired countless shots, but hit almost nothing. The human ships danced through their formation like leaves in the wind, using techniques learned from studying how ancient Earth cultures had moved through hostile territory. "Commander," Ryan called out, "more ships approaching." "But they're not Zyraxian." Amanda looked at her display as new signals appeared. Ships from other species, ones who had been watching the conflict with interest, were arriving. They came not to fight, but to observe how humans were using the space roads in ways no one had seen before. The Meridian ships arrived first, their crystalline structures reflecting the light of distant stars. Then came vessels from the Archival Mind Collective, their sensors recording everything. More followed, until the space around Earth was filled with witnesses to the confrontation. "Your blockade is illegal under galactic law," a Meridian representative announced to all ships. "The humans have demonstrated a legitimate historical connection to these roads, and their method of use causes no harm." The Zyraxian commander's image showed his frustration. "They are disrupting the established order." "No," Amanda countered. "We're restoring the natural order. These roads existed before any of us. They don't need to be controlled. They need to be understood." A series of short battles broke out as some Zyraxian ships tried to force the issue. But each time they engaged, the human ships simply flowed around them like water around rocks, using the space road's natural energy to avoid conflict while continuing their movement. "Look at your own sensors," Amanda told the Zyraxian commander. "Your weapons are causing more disruption to the roads than our entire fleet combined. Our ancestors knew better than to fight against nature. They learned to work with it instead." The turning point came when several Zyraxian ships, attempting to force their way through a space road junction, found themselves stuck in an energy eddy. The human ships, moving with the natural flow, easily helped them escape. "This is how it should be," Amanda broadcast to all ships. "Working together, not fighting over control." After 12 hours of failed attempts to stop the human ships, the Zyraxian fleet began to withdraw. They couldn't justify continuing a battle they couldn't win, especially with so many witnesses from other species. As the last Zyraxian warship departed, Amanda stood at her viewport, watching Earth's first free trade convoy move along the space roads. They traveled like their ancestors had, in harmony with the paths beneath them, understanding that true strength came not from domination, but from wisdom. "Send word to Earth," she told Ryan. "The roads are open, and this time, they'll stay that way." The confrontation had shown the galaxy something important, that sometimes the old ways were the best ways, and that progress didn't always mean forcing nature to bend to your will. The human fleet had won not through superior firepower, but through superior understanding of paths that had been there all along. Amanda smiled as she watched more ships join the growing flow of traffic along the space roads. The paths that had once guided human feet across Earth were now guiding human ships across the stars, and they were doing it in a way that honored both the past and the future. John Richardson walked through the newly constructed halls of the Galactic Transit Authority, taking in how much had changed in the past year. The building, located in neutral space near the intersection of 3 major space roads, represented something that had once seemed impossible: a truly fair system of interstellar travel. "The latest traffic reports are in," his assistant, Maria Rodriguez, said as she fell into step beside him. Traffic flow is up 40% since we implemented the new resonance-based guidance systems. John nodded, remembering the long negotiations that had led to this moment. After the failed Zyraxian blockade, other species have become intensely interested in human methods of using the space roads. Instead of keeping the knowledge to themselves, Earth's leaders had offered to share it freely. "How are the new joint patrols working out?" he asked as they entered the main control center. The massive room was staffed by members of 12 different species, all working together to manage the growing network of space traffic. "Better than expected," Maria replied. "The Zyraxians are actually proving to be excellent teachers now that they're not trying to control everything. Their experience combined with our methods has made the roads safer than ever." The main display showed hundreds of ships moving along the glowing paths of the space roads. Human vessels flowed alongside alien craft of all shapes and sizes, each using a combination of traditional knowledge and new technology to navigate the cosmic highways. A Meridian supervisor approached them, its crystalline form chiming softly. "The first class of mixed-species traffic controllers has completed their training," it reported. "They're already showing remarkable ability to predict and prevent congestion using the human resonance patterns." John smiled, remembering how difficult it had been to convince some species that their ancient Earth methods could be applied to modern space travel. Now, the results spoke for themselves. Ships using path resonance technology had fewer accidents, used less energy, and traveled faster than those using conventional methods. "The archival mind has finished their initial study," Maria added, handing him a datapad. "They've confirmed what we suspected. Similar patterns to our ancient paths exist on hundreds of worlds. We're not the only ones whose ancestors marked these roads." This discovery had led to one of the most important changes in galactic society. The Galactic Transit Authority wasn't just about managing traffic, it was about preserving and sharing the knowledge of how different species had historically interacted with the space roads. John made his way to the conference room, where representatives from various worlds gathered daily to discuss road management. The Zyraxian delegate, once their fiercest opponent, now sat as an equal member of the council. "The human pattern recognition systems have helped us understand problems we never knew we had," the Zyraxian admitted during the meeting. "Our own ancient records show similar markings, but we had dismissed them as primitive art." The discussion turned to plans for expanding the network of tracking stations. These facilities, built at points where space roads intersected, used a combination of all known methods to monitor and assist passing ships. "We're seeing something remarkable," a scientist from the archival mind reported. "The roads themselves seem to be responding to our more harmonious approach. Energy flows are becoming more stable, and new paths are becoming visible." This was perhaps the most surprising discovery of all. The space roads weren't just static paths through space. They were living things in their own way, responding to how they were used. The more species worked together to understand them, the more the roads revealed. Later that day, John visited the training center where new pilots learned to navigate the roads. In one simulator, a young Zyraxian was learning Earth meditation techniques to better feel the road's energy. In another, a human pilot studied ancient Zyraxian star charts, learning from their centuries of experience. "It's not about who owns the roads anymore," the head instructor, an elderly Meridian, told him. "It's about understanding them. Each species brings their own wisdom, their own piece of the puzzle." The change had spread beyond just space travel. Species that had once competed now worked together, sharing knowledge that had been passed down through generations. Ancient wisdom combined with modern technology in ways that benefited everyone. "We have a situation," Maria called out suddenly. A new ship had appeared on the main display, its energy signature unlike anything they'd seen before. But instead of panic, the control room responded with calm efficiency. Representatives from 3 species worked together, combining their different methods to understand and guide the unknown visitor. Within minutes, the ship was safely integrated into the normal flow of traffic. "That's what makes this work," John said to Maria as they watched the situation resolve itself. We're not just managing space roads anymore. We're building bridges between cultures. The day ended with a ceremony marking the graduation of the first class of multi-species road wardens. These teams would patrol the space roads not as controllers, but as helpers and guides, ensuring safe passage for all travelers. As John watched the ceremonial lights trace patterns similar to those his ancestors had carved in cave walls, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Humanity had not just gained access to the stars, they had helped create a new way of thinking about space travel. "What's next?" Maria asked as they looked out at the streams of ships flowing peacefully along the ancient paths. John smiled, pointing to a distant section of space where new energy patterns were beginning to appear. "There are still so many roads to discover," he said. "And now we can explore them together, as it should have been all along." The space roads that had once divided species now united them. The paths the humans had marked in earth and stone now guided travelers among the stars. And the wisdom of countless generations, human and alien alike, had finally found its true purpose, not in controlling the roads, but in understanding them. The new order wasn't just about managing traffic through space. It was about maintaining the delicate balance between progress and tradition, between innovation and wisdom, between the many species that shared the cosmic highways. And at its heart was a simple truth that humans had known all along: the best paths are those we walk together.